All right, so I'm going to be without some recording gear for a while, so I got a couple of videos pre-planned for the next 2 weeks, and they're really interesting articles that I wanted to talk about anyway. So I've had one in the queue, and I found the other one fairly recently. Just really good concepts about gaming and all that. Both related to Fallout, kind of, but the concepts in them go well beyond Fallout. So we're going to talk about that. Before we do, gameplay today is Fumes. There's a free demo out there on Steam. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can check it out. The mission right now is defend a convoy. Now, this is part of the newer updates that they've done to the demo since the last time I did some recordings on this, and this is one of the new features. Basically, you're just intercepting this convoy and defending it from the attackers, which are the red triangles on the radar there on the top. And yeah, it's kind of a neat concept, and definitely expands the game quite a bit. But if you like these kind of post-apocalyptic driving, shooting, beat-em-up kind of games, definitely check this out. So, without further ado, let's just jump right in. Now, this article comes from Bounding Into Comics. Fallout New Vegas director cautions devs to avoid making unnecessarily large titles. I don't think most players want games that are 6 times bigger than Skyrim or 8 times bigger than The Witcher 3. Now, he actually goes well further into this. This is Josh Sawyer talking. Way further into this than just don't make big games. But there's a couple of points that he talks about that I really want to highlight, and a couple of points that I want to talk about that he didn't really touch on, especially some of the ideas I have for games that are like well beyond the scope of my ability to do them right now. But I keep working towards that. So let's just jump right in here. So the first thing is this introductory thing, and offering his thoughts on the ongoing debate regarding the ever-growing size of modern video games. Fallout New Vegas director Josh Sawyer has cautioned his fellow devs to chill out when it comes to the scope of their games, as most players are not interested in games that are big just for the sake of being big. Now, I do largely agree with that. Game size has to fit the world. It has to fit the development team, obviously, and it has to not be repetitive or feel empty or feel boring. So those are like the core aspects of avoiding creating too big of a world. Is you have to fit, you have to be able to fit the world to the size of the content you want to produce for it, sort of more than the other way around, which is, fitting the content to the size of the world, because if you do that, you're going to end up spending 20 years making the game because you want this big, massive world and you have to fill it with stuff. So that's kind of the approach that I've kind of taken. Now, a couple of approaches that I've taken are not that at all, but we'll talk about that later. So going in further on this, and there is a video here, so if you guys check out this article, definitely play through the video and just, it's not the whole 21 minutes. It starts midway through and it goes to the about 15-minute mark, at least the context of what we're talking about here. So you could watch the whole video too. That said, the big points that I wanted to talk about is right here. Moving to give his response, Sawyer began. So ultimately, we want people to be happy that they bought the game, and we want them to be happy that they played the game. Or satisfied, he then paused. Maybe happy is not the right word, but we want the player to play the game, and whatever amount that they play, we want them to come away and say, I'm glad I bought the game. I enjoyed it. Great. Awesome. So, just having someone's money is not good enough. That's very short-sighted because we have reputations to maintain. We want people to think well of us. Now, that was in response to a comment that says, well, does it matter if players don't finish the game, if the players are not, getting through the story? And he was kind of responding to that because they were hinting at they're not coming away satisfied. And he said, well, no, we want them to enjoy the game. We don't necessarily want them to finish the game, but we want them to be happy that they bought the game. And that's a great opinion to take. That's a great approach to take. I personally am certainly taking that one to heart, because the enjoyment of the game is paramount in my mind, and this puts an interesting spin on it in context of game size and how you approach the development of the game is more for the player's enjoyment, and to capture that, that interest, that imagination, that spark of curiosity, to want to play through the game and explore that world. And especially, Josh works mainly with open world games where you do have that exploration aspect involved. So that's something that I like to continue to do as well in my games, is have that degree of exploration, or that degree of finding new things in the world, kind of an open world approach. And, this is a really good point to make, because you want the gamers, the players to be happy. You want your customer to be happy so that they have a good impression of the game that they bought from you, so that maybe they'll have that good impression carry through to the next game that you're selling, and they might want to buy that and enjoy that too. So it's all about reputation in the context of trying to make, players happy. And that's the ultimate goal, is just, bringing a little joy into the world, I guess. The short and sweet of it is, I think that's why most game developers, at least most game developers worth their salt, are in it to begin with, is to, do something that brings a level of enjoyment to a group of people that, wouldn't have had that little aspect of their lives otherwise. So, that's why we build these worlds. That's why we build these games. That's why we want to make the things we want to make, because we have these ideas that are like, well, wow, people really enjoy that, and we want to put that into the game. But there is a lot of strategy involved in that, because you want to have people enjoy that game on their terms, and their terms might not be your terms. So you have to think about those things when you're designing these games. I have to admit, a lot of developers don't think that way anymore, or they've gotten so far out of touch with what gamers are looking for that they can't address what the terms are of the majority of players. So that's an issue too. So moving on to the next point I wanted to highlight here. And one of the researchers said, we find like 2/3 of people at the time don't finish the games they start. He told his viewers, and they went on to sort of suggest, therefore, you should make shorter games. And I asked what I thought was the obvious question. I said, how did that correlate to the enjoyment of the player? And he said, we never asked that. So that's in response to the, this marketing team. Is it marketing team or usability group? It was the usability group that they were researching. They didn't even think about, did they enjoy it even though they didn't finish it? And, a lot of gamers don't finish their games. They just enjoy living in the world. Especially games like Josh is making, you're talking about, Fallout New Vegas. You're talking about, Alpha Protocol, all of these games that are very open world. Cyberpunk, Witcher 3, Skyrim, all of that stuff is very open world, very you figure out how you want to play the game on your own terms, because it's a very open world and there's a lot of options on how you want to explore this world, not necessarily following the main story arc, but just doing things on your own terms, in your own way. And that needs a big world necessarily in order for people to enjoy that kind of gameplay, enjoy just living in the world. Even though they're not finishing the main story quest, even though they're not finishing that, what Josh says is critical path, the main story arc, they still enjoy the game. They still enjoy exploring. They still enjoy going out there and finding new things that they didn't see yesterday in the game. So that's an interesting point to make there, because again, it doesn't suggest short games. It doesn't suggest small worlds, but at the same time, he does later in this video say you don't need to make massive worlds either. And I think there's an important balance to be struck there. So we're going to talk about that a little later too. Now going down to the next little block here, which is actually that. There we go. Games got bigger and bigger, and it became more and more impressive. And then at a certain point, supporting that volume of stuff, there's a quality dip. Like, we're not employing 8 times the number of area designers and artists to go along with such scopes, and so things start to feel less unique and bespoke. That being said, I don't think we need to go bigger anymore. Sawyer ultimately concluded we can kind of chill out, and within a small margin, we can make a little bigger or a little smaller, as long as the player feels like when they come out of the world that they have a big, vast space to explore, and that is a fun experience, and it doesn't feel repetitive like a grind. So that right there is the crux of the situation. Is you can't make it too small, but you can't make it too big either. You have to, like I said, size the world to the size of the content that's going in it. And if you make enough content, you can make a bigger world. But vice versa gets a little insane, because you're trying to fill this world endlessly, and the world gets bigger, and then the content needs to be more expansive, and so on and so forth. Now, there are techniques to, reuse assets in a way that they don't necessarily look exactly the same. I've experimented a lot with like shape keys in 3D models where you can dramatically change the structure of a model. You can also attach things to it, like, especially with vehicles. And in fact, perfect example is Fumes here. Fumes is a good example of a large world that seems very bespoke. Now, the vehicles have a lot of different attachments to them. You can change the weapons, you can change the tires, you can change like the light rack on the vehicle, and then change the skin as well. And there's multiple vehicles, so you've got this vast array of customizability where the vehicles that you end up running into in the world are dramatically different from each other because all of these parts are procedurally attached and changed and altered. So that does make it look a lot more bespoke than it would normally. And then obviously there's the biomes in this game. Now it's not like the biomes are a critical gameplay aspect. They're really just an environment for you to drive through. But there's enough of a variety there that when you go into a new biome, things change dramatically, and it keeps things fresh. It keeps things interesting. And so every time you play, you're going through these different biomes, you're running into these different things, and it's like, it's kind of, it's triggering that exploration bug in your mind to want to see what's over that next hill. Or at least it does very much for me. So I think in the context of a very large world that's done procedurally, I think Fumes did it very well, and they could do it very well because this is a more low poly game. The art style yields very well to that low poly aspect, and so they don't need to have high polygon count, massive detailed models that are, way over the top. They can keep things simple and therefore very customizable and very expandable to make that very big world. So good example right there. And he also makes a lot of different examples too, like Cyberpunk, Witcher 3, New Vegas, Skyrim. Those are all very good examples of very open worlds that don't get repetitive, that don't keep getting more and more repetitive as it goes. Now, the other point I do want to make about this is games can be too small for at least a subset of players. So an example of this for me was Mad Max. Mad Max, I loved the crap out of Mad Max. I played that game. I played through the entire game multiple times. Went through the main story arc as well as all the side quests, and I explored that world to the nth degree. I mean, it was almost, it was very much an obsession with me. I really enjoyed living in that world. And the problem with that I ran into is, like, I wanted to keep exploring, and the world is the world. You have limitations in that world. It's not like an endless, expanse to explore. There's only what they put in the game. And I ran up against that limitation. Most players probably did not, but I sure did. And so I'm one of the small little group of players that actually did run into those limitations and see the world is not as big as I would have liked it to be. I don't know how big that group is. I would imagine, I'm not like a pro gamer or anything, so I would imagine it's a pretty big group if I'm in it. So maybe that world could have been a little bigger. Whereas most games that I play, like, I have not seen everything in New Vegas that New Vegas has to offer. I have not seen everything in Skyrim that Skyrim has to offer. Cyberpunk, probably most of it I've seen. I'm probably pretty close there. I did play through that pretty extensively. So maybe Cyberpunk is another one that I'm in that group where I ran up against those walls, and I have run into walls in Cyberpunk. So there are those players, and they're different for every game, that are just going to be so enthralled with your game, with your concept, with the world that you built, that they're going to run into those walls. And if you keep those walls as far out as you can, that is a good thing. But again, you have to fill it with content. You can't let it feel repetitive or empty or boring. So it is that balance. And the designers of Mad Max certainly made sure that it felt bespoke, that made sure that it felt natural. And part of the reason why I was so interested and enthralled with that game is because they put that time in and made it feel bespoke, made it feel like every area was its own place. And that's why I ran into those walls. So maybe if they made the world bigger, I would have not been interested. I would have started to see, the sameness, the repetitiveness, and got bored with it, and then I wouldn't have gone that far. So, again, it is a balance. It is something to think about, and it is kind of a difficult situation to be in. Now, so that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about the article. Now we're going to talk about some of my own thoughts beyond this, which is taking that world design to another degree. And even though Starfield was not a favorite of mine and most people, I do think that Starfield did a good job of placing bespoke content next to procedurally generated content. That mechanism in that game was very well thought out and very well built. Now, everything else in that game was not, and it did feel samey in a lot of the procedural stuff, and they should have maybe gone a little further with that and generated more variant content. Like, you wouldn't need to make the same box the same way every single time. You could have used shape keys and textures and attach points and everything to make it feel like those are not the same box. Whereas you run into the same box a lot in Starfield. You run into the same things over and over and over again in Starfield. And for whatever reason, you do that in Fallout and Skyrim too, or, Elder Scrolls. But it didn't feel repetitive as much as it felt like with Starfield. I don't know why, but Starfield just felt very, very boring, very tedious. So the one aspect of Starfield that I did appreciate was the mechanism that places that bespoke content in alongside all the procedurally generated stuff, and it keeps that world a little more interesting, which it did need, because the procedural stuff, like I said, was pretty awful. Now, I like that idea. I like being able to hybridize the model like that, and I've been working on different ideas on how to do that in my own games. But then the procedural side is also very, very important, and that's where they fell flat. I think that, some of the stuff that I've been doing, which is using those shape keys, using those textures, using those altering things that you can plug numbers into and dramatically change the shape and context of an object in the world, that goes a long way into making a more bespoke looking world, even though it is procedurally generated. Obviously, the biome work is important. All of these things, and for me, my ultimate goal is to make a game that is ridiculously massive but does not feel repetitive. And some of the technologies are getting there. It's getting closer, and I think there's something to be said for artificial intelligence to be doing some of the real-time designing of levels of areas. I think that there's something there. I haven't gotten too far into it, but I think AI is gonna come into effect here. As long as that AI can be consistently repeatable, it will definitely come into play. Like a lot of the algorithms that I use for procedural generation, you get a coordinate, and based on that coordinate, it returns a value or a set of values that you can then spring from to generate the content in that world. So every time you build that world out, it's going to look exactly the same every single time. So that allows you to take some liberties with how much of the world is stored in file structure, whereas it's being stored in algorithms. So you don't have any storage at all. It's just procedurally spun out, and you build that world, like Minecraft. Minecraft uses those techniques. You put in a seed value, it's going to generate the same world every single time without fail. If you can build, and I don't think a large language model is going to work for this because there's too much variance there, but even a simpler neural network would potentially have the ability to have that repeatable infrastructure. So you give it a seed and you give it the values that it needs, and it'll churn out the same thing every single time. I think there's a potential there, and certain neural network designs do yield themselves to that. So that'll give you a degree of intelligence into designing these worlds, where it'll actually be able to make pseudo decisions on where to place objects and how to lay things out. And so you're going to get closer to the design of a town that would have been designed by a human as opposed to an algorithm. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think that is coming, and that's something I really want to look into, because every other way of designing a world that I've tried, you end up looking samey every time, and towns start looking the same every single time, and it gets repeatable. And in fact, even Fumes has that. So you can see, like, there's some buildings in the background, and these buildings are the exact same model every single time, but the layout of that, it doesn't look like a town, first of all, and second of all, you end up seeing them look the same every single time, and it just gets boring and samey. So, yeah, I think there's something to be said for AI coming into this, and I also think that just considerate design choices and using those shape keys, using every tool available, allows you to build a bigger world. And like I said, I mean, that's a goal of mine, is to build a world where you're effectively just driving like Fumes here. You can just drive into the sunset and discover new things and have new content, new games, new missions to do. So you would, stumble upon a town or something where you can pick up quests and go and do them. And they're procedurally generated quests, and there's procedurally generated characters, and procedurally generated everything. I think that there's an avenue there where you can get to that point. And that's something that I've been working on for a very long time. Not to much success, because obviously you're not seeing no games out of me that do that. But I've been working on it, and that's where this article really kind of lit a fire under me, because I really want to keep doing that, keep moving forward with that. And maybe someday I will. So anyway, this is a bit of a long article, a bit of a long video here, but yeah, that's what I got for you guys. What do you think about, game world sizes? Do you think that they are too big? Do you think that they need to be bigger, but they can't be samey and boring? Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. And if you enjoy this kind of video, subscribe to the channel, and I will talk to you guys later.